Hey everybody, welcome to Jerry's Live. As always, I'm your host, Amy Gardner Dean, and today's episode is JL 172. We're doing an oil paint along single subject again, where I do a demo and you're going to follow along at home, and you can do it in acrylic, oil, whatever you've got. We're doing oil and we do have specific colors we're using, but you can always use what you have and just kind of play along with us. So we did our first episode of this last week, and that was JL 171. Either of those numbers you can put into the search box on jerrysartarama.com, JL 171 or JL 172. That same list of supplies is going to come up so you can see what colors we have that we're using. We're using the Lucas 1862 oils. We're trying to do, I'm doing two studies. I'm doing a cool version of the complement and a warm version of the complement, and it seems like things went a little off the rails last week, and I think at the end people started to get what we were talking about a little more when we talked about kind of the psychology of the two cups, which one might have coffee and which one might have tea, just for the psychology aspect of it. This isn't a do or die, you have to follow Amy's rules. This is not, these are the only colors that can make warmer complements. These are the only colors that can make cooler complements. It's not that you can't use just a primary red, a primary blue, and a primary yellow to do what you're doing. Where we took that from was where we've worked in our color theory lessons that we've got through our sheet that we've got that's always on when you've got the description of the show, whether you're watching on YouTube or on Facebook. There's the description of the show. It says see more. You can click on that. There are two lists that are links that you can go to that are provided to you for free, that you can pull up any show we've ever done, which now that we're on 172 could kind of seem a little daunting. But if you go to the one that's by the subject matter, you can go to color theory and you can see all the episodes that we've done. And we've done 5 or 6 at this point, Katie, I think. And then we've also done composition. This lesson is built on top of those. And that's where I think we have kind of just like, whoop, lost a lot of people last week. We're taking all that information that we learned, and then we're kind of putting that spin with the primaries into color psychology, which is warm colors make people feel a certain way. Cool colors make people feel a certain way. You don't have to use only a warm color or only a cool color to get that. We were using complements to get that kind of emotional thing. That's how artists that are in museums or very successful artists can use color to make you feel a certain way, okay? So you don't have to use the colors I'm using, and I'm doing one cool and I'm doing one warm, so if you really want to kind of push the envelope, you can do that to see which one kind of you like more. I really recommend that you over time do both. Go back and watch the show and try the other one that you didn't do, okay? We're going to be using those same color combinations that we had last week. And I know that I'm going to have you show above camera because I'm going to very quickly, because we want to get into this. And if you like just can't fathom this part, go back and watch it later, because I just don't want to like have to use a lot of time to explain it. All right. So here is just a color wheel, right? And we were talking about our warmer colors, which are kind of more in this range, and our cooler colors, which are kind of more in this range, okay? So when I'm saying I want you to use for the warm, for this exercise, a study, remember, study's not a finished painting. You are practicing. And practice is a 4-letter word, I understand, but you need to give it a shot, okay? So when I'm saying use that warmer red, I'm asking you to use a magenta, because this is your warmer colors in here, right? So it's closer to the middle, so use that magenta. The ultramarine blue is closer to the violet as well, so use that. The yellow that we were using is more of kind of the sunshiny yellow, so that's closer to this side of the color wheel, okay? The other yellow, closer to the cool side, right? So that's what we were using with that. We were using a phthalo blue, which is really more kind of a bluish green blue. It has that kind of green undertone to it, so that's closer to this cooler side. The yellow was a lemon yellow primary, which is more of a greenish yellow, which is closer to that side. The red was more of, and I know people are saying, but it's red. Why are you saying it's orange? It is, if you put a whole bunch of reds together and you put them by the most orange looking red to the most magenta looking red, that red is closer to that orange side. So you want it to be closer to that side to be able to kind of play a little more fairly when you're mixing those colors, okay? And you were trying to get that orange, you want it to be a cooler orange. So it needed to be with the cooler yellow to put that through. Does that make a little bit more sense with using the color wheel for that? Okay. So I'll have this here, so if we have other questions about it, that's fine. But, and I know that there were some people that were very overwhelmed and not really sure, and then it seemed like there were a lot of aha moments too. So, so definitely, if you really are struggling with this, go back to our color theory episodes and watch right from the start, because we talk about primaries. We've got some clear overlays that have paint on them. We put them down. We talk about what makes what, and the color mixing makes a little more sense that way. And then we talk about things like hues and tints and just everything, shades, the whole 9 yards. So if those are things that are terms where you're like, what do you mean? You really need to see those things and then come back to this after watching this with kind of all that knowledge, and then believe me, this is going to make a lot more sense. Okay, so last week we did the orange and blue, and we've got our warmer colors here. We've got our cooler colors here, more of that kind of green undertone. So we're going to use those same colors that we used last time, and we're going to switch that out with we'll do red and green first. So I've got that magenta red primary. I've got the ultramarine blue. And then I've got the cadmium yellow, which is much more kind of that sunshiny yellow that's kind of airing a little bit more on that, closer to that orange side, okay? For our cool colors, I've got the phthalo blue, which is that kind of more greeny blue. Not to say this isn't a cool color. If you just say, look at this color and say, is that warm or cool? Obviously that's going to be cool, but it is a warmer, cool color when it's closer to those kind of hot colors on the wheel. We've got that brighter kind of little bit more orangey red. I'll move that over in just a second because it looks like I'm cutting it off. There we go. Okay. And then we've got a more lemony yellow, okay, which is kind of got that greener undertone. I'm adding titanium white off to the side for all these because we're going to be using that white. I'm also going to put, do we need this brush in here, do you think, to focus?
Nope, you're good.
Okay. I'm going to take it out because I'm going to put my Van Dyke brown, which we're going to use if we want to kind of darken anything. It's just kind of a very dark neutral brown that we're using in place of black, because blacks can be warm and cool. We've talked about that in the black and white episode. If you missed that episode, watch that as well, because that's an episode that plays into kind of temperature. You can have a black or a white, which seem like they don't have a temperature, and there are undertones that show that they do. Okay, and then there's yellow ochre. So we're going to use that if we need to knock kind of a color brightness down at all, okay? Because we may, with the last one, play a little bit with that, with saturation of color. With these, other than adding that white, we got some color strength here, right? Which I was doing it more kind of straight up like that, just to make this a little easier for people to kind of wrap their brains around. I decided we would stick with the cup since, in all fairness, people may have already drawn it on their panels, and I didn't want to do that. If you're playing along at home and you do not have you do not have the thing drawn, you will have time to do it because I'm going to work on 2 different ones, okay? And she's going to put the cup up here in just a second. That'll be where my face is instead, because it's a crazy hair day, so I'd really rather you look at this cup. And we're going to go from there. Now we are doing, let's do red and green first. Okay, so the one on the left is going to be the cooler version of the red and green. The one on the right is going to be the warmer version. Okay, now I'm using a cool and a warm color. What does that mean? Okay, this is just a bottle that I did before. Now, even though this yellow, the green is toned down to where it's almost not even a green. It's been just, a lot of the heat's been taken out of it. It's a yellow green, but it has some of the yellow ochre in it. This still reads as warm because of that really deep red richness, right? Even though this green has been kind of fizzled out. This reads as cooler. It's got that very green. It's got kind of almost a grass green around the outside. A little bit of a warmer highlight than this one has. And it's warm up here, but again, that color's been knocked down a little bit. So it doesn't have the heat and the intensity of this, right? Does everybody agree that this looks much warmer? If you're looking at temperature, this looks much cooler. Okay. All right. Now this is, what this is the green and the red at the almost full saturation. All right. Meaning the color mostly straight from the tube. A little bit of mixing here and there with some of the shadows, but for the most part, straight from the tube. This is where you're losing your saturation. That is very grayed looking, okay? This is where you're losing your saturation. This is still pretty saturated. It's lighter, but it doesn't have the power punch of the really deep straight from the tube because a little bit of white's been added, okay? So that kind of cools that heat of the color down. All right? Did everybody seem like they got those two? Okay. Saying that because I want to make sure that they kind of are grasping that. Okay, so what we're going to do is and somebody said that they would like to see the cup of color, I guess, so we can do that. Cool, warm, what we'll do is we will switch these. So for the cool one, we're going to do a green cup. For the warm one, we're going to do a red cup, and then we'll alternate the backgrounds. Okay? So we'll just to make it so that is a warmer kind of green, and then that's a cooler green. All right. Can everybody? Yeah, we can see the sketch well enough, don't you think? Yep. Okay. All right. So we're using the Pro Stroke brushes. I'm not sure if that's what everybody's got or not, but I'm just going to use that 4 that's a big flat because it's easy for me to kind of reach to mix with this. All right, so if this is going to be my red, we're using that primary, okay? I'm just going to use it straight for right this second to kind of outline that cup edge so you guys can see it a little better. Okay. Now, if you're wanting to do the cooler one, go ahead and start doing this with your green that you're going to make. Okay. All right, so this is phthalo, so we really are going to need way more yellow than green, because remember, phthalo packs a big in-your-face punch. This is just a little bit of yellow pulled into it, or I mean just a little bit of this blue pulled into it, and look at how strong that is. It's almost electric, isn't it? Okay. Remember, this does not have to look like a cup, folks. We're just we're playing with color. We're just using that as kind of our image. So it can be even abstract if you want. What's important is the way that you're going to mix the color. Okay. All right. So we've got that. We've got that. Let's kind of ghost in our background. So we're going to come back and we're going to temper this in just a minute. Now with this, we are making the green more of our kind of center of interest. So I'm knocking this orange back because really, or the red back, because really this could, at full strength of color, if you were going to use that red as your kind of primary color that you were laying down, and not the green, you could actually skew this so that this would look more hot than cool. So to keep this with our cool color scheme that we're doing, we're going to knock that heat out with that white. See how that little bit kind of softens it and makes it definitely not anywhere. That doesn't mean that you can't take a harder edge with your red and kind of mix it in there. The beauty of the red and green is that if you mix those together, it's going to make almost like a chromatic black. So that you can actually use that instead of that Van Dyke brown. If you want to make some of this more kind of the greenier color, let's go ahead and get some of our green mixed. Now, Ultramarine does not have the same strength that the phthalo does. So you can see that's a lot more greeny yellow. It might be hard to see.
I really like that color.
I do too, but it's not as like green as like what? See, it's almost like a pea green, isn't it? Or olive green.
It's one of the nice shirts that we wear.
Yeah.
Out of the week.
Yeah. Well, yours is more grayed than this though.
Yeah.
But it's that based on that color. So with this, now this is a nice, more of a cool color. So we're going to have to play that down a little bit with some white in a minute. So that magenta is going to be more of our focus. Because you could switch these and you could make this the cooler and that one the warmer really easy by as far as what it would make you feel emotion-wise, by focusing on the saturation only of that red, and then, really blotting this green out some, and then making this kind of the more bold of the greens. The saturation plays as much into it as anything else. So I'm going to make this a little bit darker, and I'm going to pull in, since this is not going to make as nice of a kind of black color, I'm going to pull in that little bit of Van Dyke brown with this. Okay. All right. So to tone these down in the front, let's add even that little bit more white, okay? We're still doing red and green. This is still a complement, so now you can see with adding this white, this really, there's your color, Katie. It really takes the saturation out. This really looks almost more like a kind of a grayed color that just happens to be a little bit green. And what that's from is from just that ultramarine being a more kind of violety blue. It doesn't, I don't feel like it makes as clean of a green. It makes very nice violets. It makes very nice, when we did our ones yesterday for the red and orange, it kind of makes that really nice blue. So that's why I'm saying you need to play with this, because this could be really hot or it could be cool, vice versa. So we're just sticking with those same ones that we used to show you kind of how you could push with those two back and forth. All right, so here, this red is really strong, so we're gonna have to add a lot more white. And because that's still got some good strength to it, I'm gonna snag just a little bit of that yellow ochre to kind of temper that down some. See how that took some of the heat out of that? It was kind of like a pretty, almost a corally pink. We didn't want that because we're trying to make this cooler. Okay. All right. So now let's play with the green. And we know that this is a super hot, super punchy green. So what we're going to have to do is tone it down some. We're going to put a little bit more yellow in it. And then we're going to snag just a little bit of yellow ochre and a little bit of white, because we're trying to make this come off as a little cooler. Okay. We may not be able to do it with this sitting, but ideally you would want to go back and kind of, you could leave a little bit of the edge of that, that kind of phthalo outline. You would want to tone that all down so that you only see pops of it. Otherwise it's still got a lot of color strength and heat to it, okay? Add a little bit more white. Again, we're not, there were some people that had said that they really wished that this would have been a more finished project. You need to learn to let go of the idea of finished project every time you pick up your paintbrush, every time you go to make something, because that's not, a finished project gets you way too invested and too involved in whatever item that you're doing. You can, if you make a mistake, a lot of times we just, as people, we don't want to give up, so we will soldier on even though it's not working and we've made a mistake and we're pretty sure it's there but we're not sure what it is. This type of practice gives you that ability to make the mistakes here first, so that when you go to do final artwork, you have a lot more success a lot more quickly. So that's something that you need to get over, it always having to be some finished piece. And although that would be great, and I would enjoy sitting here and doing a finished piece, that's not what the show is about. The show is about you guys taking some time to learn and practice with some color. And with this, since this is oil, I'm just going to mix right on the actual painting itself, because it's still wet, so I can kind of pull that through. See how it's getting cooler, right? We've toned it down a lot. Now we're going to have to really pump up that magenta to make it a lot brighter to compensate for this, aren't we? And we may have to darken that green some with the brown to kind of bring a little bit more strength and boldness to it. Put a little bit of the white highlights in there, just because I feel like that kind of helps tone that down as well. Okay. All right, so let's go over to our warm one here. Pull this down so I'm not covering up the... Could you switch these colors and do these? Like I said, yes. Because I'm sure we're getting people that are just joining and they're like, "What? This doesn't make sense. What are you doing?" So you could switch those and really play up more the heat of that red and that phthalo and tone down the magenta we've got here. Okay, so with this we're going for, blot out some of that. We're going for a little bit more full strength, right? So I'm just going to paint this part here. Do we have any questions so far?
Everybody's pretty quiet today so far.
Okay. They probably got scared off from last week. It's okay. Don't run away. Now see, with the pink with this, that makes a really nice, really warm color, doesn't it? Okay, I'm going to come back in. Gonna dry through it. Caffeine to the rescue. All right. I'm going to get a little bit of white.
I do have a question in regards to the mixing. MJ Pete 27 asked, he said, or they said, I am curious about mixing the paint. I was taught that you never use your palette knife, that you use your palette knife to mix, never your brushes. Do you use your brushes because you can get them for less working at Jerry's?
No. It's, to me, I like what it looks like when I mix with the brush. I do not. I hate how it's way too, the color becomes, for me, too amalgamous looking. I don't like what that looks like. Just a lot of the artists that I've studied and then studied with tend to mix on the actual painting itself, and or a little bit, you know, on the side with the brush like I'm doing, and then apply it. And I think that it reads better. It's much more painterly. Otherwise it starts looking too, unless you're really good at applying your paint, it looks too Warholish. And I think that that's, I think that that's, I know when I used to go to classes with my grandmother in the 70s, when I was a really little kid, I was one of those people that was working over on the little stuff they would give me to do, but I was always listening to hear what they said. And he was a huge palette knife mixing only proponent. And when I go back and look at her works that I've got at my house, it very much shows. I think that she, especially because she did a lot of landscapes, I think if they'd been painted on the canvas as opposed to applied after they were mixed, I think it would have looked very different. Would have been much more impressionistic and less controlled. And I think that was what she was, I feel like she was always maybe missing from her work in my taste preferences. But it's just because somebody says in a class, you know, do what they say in a class, because you're going to get chewed out otherwise probably. But that doesn't mean that that's what you have to do. You can try it, and you can on your own. And mixing with your brush is not going to damage your brush. Just be really good about cleaning your brushes after every painting session. You don't have to like jam the color up into the brushes at all. It doesn't have anything to do with the brush life. And you know what, I work for Jerry's, but I have to buy my own stuff too. I mean, I get a discount, but it's not the stuff for here. Yes, they provide it for the show, but for my own personal stuff, I purchase things myself. So when I say something works really well and I like it, it's because I'm using it myself, you know, for work. So, okay, do we see how this is looking warmer now? Mm-hmm. Is that getting warmer? So let's play with the, I'm sorry, it sounds like my phone is buzzing.
It's interesting to me how much that magenta cup is, especially on the screen, popping forward.
Yes.
Compared to that green one.
Yes.
Like you really can see the...
Well, and we can play with the green further to kind of, to make it that way too. Let's darken this some, just so we can kind of see what I'm talking about with the... Okay. I'm adding a little bit of the magenta in with this, to kind of brown that up. But it's still got some of the red in there because I put that in there. See how that gets a lot brighter, or not brighter, but warmer with that little bit of the magenta pushed in there with the green. And if you were here and you could see this, and sometimes it's hard with shine on oils when we're working with all the light in here, but even with the brightness of it being wet, you can see the redness in the green, the warmth in the green that I'm using with that magenta put in there. I mean, you can even mix it in where you can see the magenta more if you want. It's a complementary color scheme, so you can kind of play with it how you will. And then I'm going to take a little bit of that with that red to put that down under there for my shadow, so that it makes that shadow warmer. You can always add colors in to your shadow. It'll still look like a shadow, but that will really help, especially with the color, to push that color theory that you're going for. If you add that in, and because it might not be something people notice anything but subconsciously, but it's there, and the mind will read it. All right, so do we want to add a little bit more to this at all, or do you think we're done and should go to how much time do we have?
It's about 25 minutes left.
Okay, should we switch to the next one?
Yeah.
Or do they want to see this red toned down a little bit more? It's up to...
You gotta give them a few minutes.
Okay, that's fine. I'll work on it a little bit.
A few minutes to catch up.
That's fine. And we can still have a little bit of red pop if you want. So you can add a little bit of, this is something my son's doing lately on his paintings, and I just love it. He's edging them with a little bit of color. So see how I put a little bit of that in there, so you know really more this is a red and green. If it starts getting kind of darker and cloudier, we can add just a little bit of heat to the cool. See how pretty that is with that little bit of red? And I'm going to tone this. We can make this darker. And tone some of this red down with that little bit of brown.
Nola on Facebook said, Nola Jones said, the intensity of the colors is also showing how appealing or not each cup is.
Well, and Nola, everybody gravitates towards, everybody's always got their own personal preference, so people gravitate towards one or the other. Some people really like cool colors. Some people really like warm colors. It really just depends on the person. And sometimes the subject matter, too, it can depend on. Notice I'm going really close to this, where it was still really vibrant green, and edging that out. Just like I'm going to leave some of the pop to it, but I'm going to try to edge a little bit more of it out. I'm just holding my brush on its side. Okay. Now see how that temperature change with the saturation? Still got some little saturated pops of color that I'm leaving in there, but see how that really helps to kind of cool that off some? That red is still a very warm color, but we've toned it down with kind of browning it out to make it cool. Is everybody pretty much on the same? And you could add a little bit more phthalo in to make it kind of a darker blue, and then again either add a little bit of the brown or a little bit of the yellow ochre into that yellow to kind of, let's do that so they kind of know what I'm talking about. Grab a tad of phthalo. See how I just added some phthalo to yellow ochre and made this really nice green? All right, so it sounds like we got everybody back. All right, so sorry about that, guys. The internet, for some reason, blinked out. So it sounds like we're back. So we're going to take those. We're going to, actually, let's put them back here. So if we want to revisit those. All right, so now the heat is on, so to speak. Not the warm or the cool heat, just the pressure. Did you start into a Glenn Fry rendition of that, Will? All right, that's okay. He fixed it, so we're going to allow you to have it that one time. All right, so this time we're going to do the violet and yellow, guys, purple and yellow. I'm putting new colors out because I kind of made a mess and mixed everywhere. So I don't want things to be cross-contaminated, but you guys don't have to do that if you've got it a little more under control. I usually work on a much bigger palette than this, but keeping it all in line for everybody to be able to see this starts getting it kind of messy for me. Okay, I'm just doing these like this just so we've got like the primaries in the round, so to speak. All right, so we've got the magenta red, we've got the, and you know what, well, I was gonna say maybe we should play a trick and see if they can determine which one's warm and cool, and I would just paint them wherever, but maybe we don't want to do that. Be like a test. There'd be nobody next to you to cheat off of, Katie. Not that you
I didn't cheat.
Did that just say when you're painting Home Alone, there's no cheat sheet. All right. So we've got, we're just going to do this. We're going to try and see what these colors look like. So this time I'm going to paint on two separate ones with those two separate groups of colors that we used, okay? We did warm and cool, but you could see how that could interchange, right? Depending on what the color scheme is you're doing. So right now we're just going to make a nice violet. And do you think we should just do violet and yellow on the different, do the yellow, the cups yellow and the background's violet to see what the difference is, yeah, so that it's the same? Okay. All right, because this phthalo is not going to make as nice, and this red are not going to make as nice as of a violet. So I'm just telling you now, because they're not a, this is going to be the part where it's going to make the most sense with that color mixing, because violets are really hard to achieve. This is taped down. I'm just going to slide it down a little bit, so it's easier for them to see the color. There we go. All right, good. All right. So we're going to keep that group that we had, the two separate. Do that. So that's your line. All right. So let's make that violet. You can pick whichever one of those ones that you've got the colors that you can play along. Just play along. So red and blue are supposed to make violet, right? So remember, phthalo is super strong, so we don't want to add like a whole ton of it. I might have already shot myself in the foot, and no, because that looks kind of reddish. All right, we're gonna grab just a touch more. All right, now that just looks like I don't even know what, right? So the best way to tell kind of what violet you've got is add a little bit of white. Now see how those two colors make kind of more like a dirty brown violet. These are not really good, crisp violet colors. Even when it's thinned, it's really more of a grayed color, isn't it? And that's part of that is because this is a cool green, or a cool blue that's got that kind of more green undertone, so it is not going to make as successful of a violet. And this red, because it's a more orangey red, is not going to make as successful of a violet either. So, which once we get this on, we'll kind of try the two opposite ones together and just see. It's still not going to turn out as well, but I think that'll make more sense for people to kind of see. Let's see if I add a little bit more white. It's kind of a gray violet, right? It's not really a true... It's not that pretty purple pop, is it? That's why when people say, but I've got red, do you have the right red? You may have red, but one red does not cut it. And as just an artist, it's like the weirdest thing to look at that and realize that, but this is why you do this practice with this. This is why if you've ever been working on a painting and you cannot figure out for the life of you what is going down with it, the colors don't look right, it's just, chances are you are using the wrong colors to mix with. You're using either the wrong red, you're using the wrong blue, you've got something going on that you just didn't realize, and it's impacting how those colors... I want this a little bit more saturated for right under here. Okay. And that really almost looks like a Payne's gray, doesn't it? It's got that kind of that undertone. Up here, it's hard for them probably to see. And this monitor is always the one that's weird. This is kind of a little bit of a red violet-y, but not a nice, crisp, beautiful, you know.
That's a good point, though, too. I know when you talk about, like, the chromatic blacks, the things that read black even though they're not.
Yes.
Look good.
It's amazing how...
Example,
yeah.
your eye just goes, that's black.
Dioxazine. If you're ever doing something with a blue and yellow complement, dioxazine straight out of the tube, if you make it really heavy, a really heavy mass tone, really thick, it reads as black. Prussian blue reads as black. So you could use that, you know, if you're doing more of a blue and orange based color scheme. So it's going to still push that mental color scheme that the viewer's seeing, but it's not going to, it's still going to read as black without using black. Sometimes black is just like sore thumb, sticks right out, looks like a mess. All right, so that's that. Now we're using that primary magenta and our ultramarine. And remember that the ultramarine is kind of transparent, so it's not going to have as much strength. Look how much prettier that already is before I add the white. Look at that. Now that's a violet, right? Is that not like really beautiful? So this is let's get a little bit of the... Now see what I'm saying about how a reddish blue is going to make a violet better, and then I've got a more of a kind of a magenta, which is a reddish or a bluish red, right? More violet undertones, that makes that color. That is just really beautiful. Now you could take that and you could take the white and you could really kind of knock it back into more kind of a lavender that doesn't have the saturation. You could even add a little bit of that brown to knock it back just a little bit, just a tiny, the tiniest little touch. We're gonna get, this is flicked some stuff on here. This is gonna be an interesting, we add the yellow. Hopefully it'll absorb quick enough.
Just pretty.
You can see there's more blue in this, right? There's more red over here. I'm going to do that purposefully so you can really see what the two differences are. See how that's much more kind of a reddish, a grapey color without the blue? So this is more of a reddish violet. The other side's a little bit heavier on that blue, so it's more of a blue violet. Add a little white so you can see the difference. So if we're looking at these right now, which one would people say is more of the warm and which one is more of the cool? I will paint while they ponder that. Have they decided? No?
Alright, let's see. Facebook saying right is warm.
Yes. Facebook would be correct. All right, so let's try the yellow. I'm actually going to get a different brush for this because there's going to be some transfer from up in the bristles, I think.
Mineral spirits today, odorless mineral spirits.
I am using odorless mineral spirits. I ended up with, because it's so humid here, and we were getting the hurricane coming through and stuff last week, and we've got tree leaves down already here, and my asthma was off the charts, so we had to switch to mineral spirits because I can't, with it this close to me painting. I don't paint this close to a solvent ever, and that was, it was too much. All right, so I'm going to grab the bright, the number 6 bright. Okay, so with this, we have this yellow is a much colder yellow than this yellow. Let me pull that out with, I can pull that out with that. See how much warmer that is in comparison? This is very green looking, right? This is much warmer. This is like a sunflower, right? That super bright, like almost a yellow orange by comparison.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if I put those down, this is full, straight out of the tube saturation. I just want you to see that that's, I'll mess with it in just a minute, but right now I just want you to see how hot that color is. Okay. All right, and then we're going to put that yellow on and see how it plays against the that kind of, I mean, this violet's useful for some things. It's especially if you're wanting to tell a story with something. You can also see with these, with how much more opaque that cadmium is versus this lemon. I'm having to put it on pretty thick to cover up that little bit of the oil pencil. Now see how much cooler that looks? It's still a yellow, right? And yellows are hot, right? That seems like what everybody thought last week. They're like, I don't understand. Reds should still be hot. Yellows should still be hot. No, this is a very cool green. And when it's added against cooler colors like this, it makes it kind of, that temperature shift, it makes it look even more cool than it probably could be.
The left one definitely looks like it was in the moonlight, that cooler light.
Yeah, where it's pulled some of that vibrancy out of it. Yes, now if we add a little bit of white, look how much more that's going to affect it. It really takes the heat out of that lemon and makes it almost neutral, right? Can you see that difference? Right now I'm just painting to get the paint on. I'm not sure how much more time we've got, so I'm not really concerned about making this look like the shadows and stuff. I just want you to be able to kind of
Like 5-10 minutes left.
Okay, good.
We lost a few minutes there.
Yeah.
We'll make up for it.
Okay. Now really, if you look at this one, does it even look like it's the violet and yellow at all? Now.
Although I'm really digging the dark violet, almost black.
But see, I love that. It'd be a great black.
Beautiful.
It's a very neutral.
But completely different than the other one.
Very different. Very, very different. Okay? So then let's take this and see how much the heat pulls out of this with the white. It's got a lot of strength still. It's still pretty bright. And we're adding way more white. But also remember, that lemon is kind of a semi-transparent, which is stuff that we've been talking about lately too. Remember the transparent versus the opaque and what the difference is going to be? Since this yellow is very opaque, adding white to it doesn't alter it as much. You have to add a lot more white to it to lighten the color as you do to a transparent color, because then the white really takes over super quick, right? And the great thing about this kind of grape color is you could use it in with the, if you wanted to tone some of this down, I'm picking up a little bit of purple for the shadows of it. You could add it together and it kind of creates a little bit of a warm brown. So you can use that. Pull that over here. Look how this almost looks yellow ochre. Look at that.
Oh, it really does.
You can use colors to make an ochre if you're out. I mean, it's not a true ochre. It's not an earth-based ochre, right? A mineral base, but look at that, how you can almost make with a little bit more of the reddish violet and that cadmium yellow. I'm going to take this clean brush and I'm going to pull some of this over here. Look at that. How close that is. Did it blow your mind, Katie? Did I? Wow.
I love color mixing.
But it's how much you can gray stuff down. You can use really weird untraditional colors if you do these practice studies and you learn and you learn. That's as close to the Schoolhouse Rock as I could come up with an art supply jingle, and it really sucks, but it's okay. See how that kind of but it still stays warm, right? because that violet's helping with that kind of, that color brightness and strength. Come back in here and kind of bring a little bit more saturation towards the middle. I mean, you can put the saturation wherever you want, but even if you toned this down, it's still got some nice little. Now, which one of these paintings has more strength to it? That, you know, what's going to have more of an impact on a viewer between the two? It really depends. It depends on what you're wanting to say. Do you want something to look like it's like late? Do you want something to look like it's very harsh lighting? It's very fluorescent. It's a, you know, a very depressing bar at 2 a.m. You know, under fluorescent lights. This is going to be the color scheme you're going to want to go with, right? Of the two, it's still yellow and violet. It just looks very different. If you want something that's sunny and warm that makes you think of like a, you know, a summer morning at like 6:30 in the morning as the sun's coming up and it's, you know, you're having coffee out on a boat dock or something like that, this probably is going to be, of the two, the one you're going to want to go with, right? So it's just, it's how those colors play and relate to each other. This is why you really want to try to do this practicing not on your final painting, because if you were planning to make a painting with a lot of violet and those are the only two colors you have, you don't have a violet, but sure, you can mix violet because you've got the primaries, right? That's not going to be helping you. Not going to be helping you. This is something you should have known already before you started that painting, and you're trying to meet that deadline because it's Christmas and you promised Aunt Edna you were going to make a painting of, I don't know, something purple for her, right? Aunt Edna is difficult. We know that. What? I don't have an Aunt Edna, but... All right. Any other questions? Does everybody feel like they've got a better handle on it this week?
Yeah.
Than last week?
It looks like lots of people are much.
So just a little bit of us playing with some of this makes a little bit more sense now. Okay. And I mean, with this one, I would almost even play that up and make the cup a little bit more white and play with some of this violets into the shadows of the yellow.
Randy asked if the color theory was the same for all media.
Yes, for the most part, okay, because some of the reds that you've got in watercolors aren't going to be the same that you're going to have in media like this, where they're much more light fast in oils. Watercolors, you know, if you're a watercolorist and you try to go to oils, you're going to find a lot more reds, right? Oh, even some more yellows, because light fastness is so much better in acrylics and oils because it helps protect the pigment from light better, where watercolor just has your gum arabic and then it kind of soaks into the paper some, and then you're kind of left with, you know, whatever, so you don't have that as much, that protection of you know, a suspension of a medium. So, but for the most part, you're going to have your cools and warms of your colors, okay? You're going to have cool reds, you're going to have warm reds. Same with yellows, same with blues. Same with anything. A red-violet, like if this was just you know, a little bit darker, that's a red-violet. A red-violet is a warm violet, right? A blue-violet is a cool violet. So in any medium, you're going to have... those warm and cool colors, and you need to be able to play with them to kind of determine how mixing is going to work best.
I think that was a lot of the confusion last week, is everybody was comparing color to color, not
warm
and cool.
Well, and that's why I had to go back through all the questions that we had and be able to kind of see where, and it seems like people were we kind of got back on the track at the end with the looking at the color and guessing what liquid would be in what, just for the feel. So
yeah, that was a great.
So yes. So if this helped you, or it's starting to open your eyes, and you missed those other episodes, definitely take time out of your schedule to go back. We even had some people say for some of them that they, even though they thought they knew, they didn't know as much about it as they expected, and it really helped them kind of. Or it's been a while. It's been a while for all of us. Been out of school a long time, and I'm not even going to say how long. And sometimes we'll do episodes where I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Just because it's been a while, especially a medium I didn't use in school, you know. So it's always good to kind of go back through things and revisit, you know, some of the kind of key points about it. And for color, it's always good to go back and revisit. It's always good to play with your color and be able to kind of work with it and have some time where it's practice. And everybody hates that word. Oh, but everybody likes my work and blah, blah, blah. I don't care how much everybody likes your work. If you're a middle school basketball player, you aren't Michael Jordan just because you touched a basketball, right? How did somebody like that get to be as great as they did, right? It's that repetitive over and over until it just becomes second nature. And color can do that for you, just like drawing skills. Color can do that for you. Color can be just as intuitive and natural as drawing with enough practice. So regardless of if you're selling work, if your color isn't your strongest point, go back and practice. Find new things that kind of turn you on for color and really let yourself experiment some. It never hurts, right? And it's fun. And it's a break. Anytime you've got your artist block. The cup doesn't have to look right. You can do whatever you want. Pick something in your studio and do it. You can do it. You can gesso extra paper that you've got and throw the stuff away later if you want. It's practice, so it's irrelevant if it's, around in 100 years, right? So, but make sure it's the same paints that you're used to using. Don't get colors that are student grade from somewhere because you don't want to waste your good paint. You don't have to put as much out as I do. I do that because it's easier for me to see, to reach, and to blend, and for you guys to see it on camera. You can always add more to your palette if you need to. So, but always take that time with the products you're actually using when you do your final art, so that it's the exact same. So there's that transfer over of the exact same colors and how they work together. Okay? And I know, yes, you're wasting a little bit of paint, but isn't that
wasting?
You feel like it. That's what I was gonna say. You were investing the time and the knowledge in yourself, and that's a way shorter, cheaper ends to the means to do it that way than to do a whole bunch of final art that you've invested countless hours and headaches and time and frustration in painting over and over because you didn't take the time to practice it first.
I have one more question.
Yes.
Joan would like to know if there are colors that can be neutral and work in cool or warm paintings.
We just looked at that with the colors earlier. You can use a neutral, like with this violet that we just did. We made it cooler, adding more blue. We made it warmer, adding more red. You could play this up and make it even more red, right? You could cool this down and make it even more blue. I mean, if I took this blue, get it a little bit better. If I took the blue, that's the ultramarine, and I just added a tiny dab of the red, I could really make this I'm just putting in enough where it's making it violet, but see how much more blue that is? Right? It's violet, but it's along more of the lines of the blue, and I can actually, let me just put more on there. Because this ultramarine is almost a blue-violet to me. They're ultramarine, and that's one of the reasons I love ultramarine from different brands. I have probably 5 or 6 different brands of ultramarine that I use in oil, and it's because of how each of them, there's a cool, some people make a cooler one, some people make a warmer one, some people make super violet-y ones. So, so see how much cooler that side is? than this side in difference, right? You can even just see it on the palette. See how that's straight blue?
Yeah.
That's a straight magenta. You can see those mixes in between, right? Warmer on this side, cooler on that side. And you can do the same with, you know, your yellows are going to be a little bit more difficult. Something that's an opaque, like the cadmium, you can get a cadmium yellow light and it's going to be more green. That would be what I would say to work with if you're really wanting to play harder with the yellow and get cool and warm variations. You're probably going to need a more opaque color because it'll be easier to do that mixing with. But because the phthalo blue is super transparent, because this yellow is semi-transparent, and then that red is a little bit more transparent, those work really nicely together when you make strong colors other than that violet. Because it's a green, blue, and it's an orange, red, and those two don't go that well together. And you know what? Let's show. So this is our ultramarine. I said I was going to do this. See how that's a little bit better violet than this, but it's still very grayed, right? See how that's a violet? But look how gray it is. It really blends into with that gray of that paper. I just added a touch of white, so that's got nothing to do with it. There's no black in it. But that red doesn't mix well with that. This red is a really good straight up, like you want a mass tone of red where it's just the red itself and you want like some fire engine pop for something. Ta-da, that's great. It makes great pinks. It makes great oranges. It's not really successful because it's so hot of a red with making cooler colors like a violet. Okay, so let's try this, the phthalo, okay, that's way too much, with the magenta and see what this makes for a violet. Just for, and just cut me off if we're getting too far into this and we need to.
Yeah, not too much longer.
Now see, that makes not the worst violet. It's still not as clear and pretty as this one is. But look how that's better, right? That's because of that magenta red. Because it's a very violety red. It's so violety, it can overcome. And I just picked up a tiny bit of the phthalo because that's all you need from that. Picked some up and took too much and wiped some off. But that tiny, just touching my brush. And that's what you don't get with a palette knife, I feel like, when you're mixing small amounts of color. You don't get that feel of how much is too much and how much is not enough. And it's a lot easier to wipe it off of a brush than it is a palette knife. And palette knives transfer a lot that you don't realize. But you notice I'm always wiping my brush. But look how pretty. I mean, that's not bad. It's, I think, a more neutral violet, don't you? Than with the magenta and the...
Yeah, it's pretty.
But it makes a really nice light purple, right? Was there any other color anybody wanted to see, or does this make a lot more sense now? With that's why I saved the purple and yellow for last, because that's kind of the trifecta of how primary colors don't work together. And I purposefully, that was why I purposefully picked the colors I did to work together, to show that they're not always going to be very successful. And by the same token, you're not going to get a really nice light yellow out of this because it's impossible, because it's such a sunshiny yellow, you know. But with those violets, you don't want this lemony yellow. This would look how green that looks with it. How much it blackens the violet, it like darkens the violet. It's just so screaming bright, which it's in a place where you want that to happen, and you want it to be kind of unsettling because of how green that is. Or you're going to use red violet, and that'll really bring out the red in the violet because of the green, right? There's a time and space for it, but to me that's not going to be a good mixing color with those two. All right. Do we feel more knowledgeable now? Do we have do we have a better handle on all this? All right. All right, guys. You guys stay safe, stay creative. Practice makes perfect. Okay? We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.